Well, welcome, friends, to this last of this semester's Ventures course, as we're going to talk about the matriarchs. And so we're delighted to have Bobbi Dykema with us to lead us through that. This is something that Bobbi is able to share in different places. Bobbi is actually an instructor that teaches a lot of different courses. And I should probably give you a more formal introduction to Bobbi. So let me share these words. Bobbi is a pastor at the First Church of the Brethren in Springfield, Illinois, and serves on the pastoral team of the Living Stream Church of the Brethren as well. But she also teaches humanities at Lincoln Land Community College and serves on the Church of the Brethren Standing Committee. She's also a convener of Women's Caucus. Bobbi completed her master's degree at United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities and a PhD in art and religion at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. She lives in Springfield, Illinois with her husband, Tim, and their cats, Saskia and Janara, who I hope we get to see once in a while wandering through the picture. So don't be surprised. Bobbi, you can say more about that and more about the background of this course. But with that, I just want to turn it over to you with the final word to say, this will be an interactive course, friends. And so make sure you know where your mute and unmute buttons are, because we'll want you to be able to jump in and talk. And Bobbi's going to lead us through a lot of really cool stuff. So Bobbi, over to you.
Thanks so much, Enton. I will say another word about the cats. Those of you who came in right early did get a chance to meet the poofy tail and the striped tail ones. If my screen jumps a bit, it's probably because a cat has jumped on the table, and they're very curious about Zoom and they like to participate. So that's what's happening. It's not, you don't need to adjust your screen or anything like that. So let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer. Holy One, in every place and generation, you have given us leaders from amongst men and women faithful to your call and to your word. So we ask your blessing as we share and listen and learn together about the wonderful women from the earliest days of your calling of your people. May their stories, their memory bless us. In Jesus' name, amen. Right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. As Enton mentioned, my doctorate is in art and religion, and so we're not just gonna be looking at texts and thinking about words, but looking at images. There's a rich artistic tradition of depicting the matriarchs, by whom we mean Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, and also the handmaids, Zilpah and Bilhah. We'll hear a bit about them as well. And so we'll be looking at the text, but also seeing how artists have interpreted those stories, and maybe taking a look at where the artists have needed to add detail that isn't present in the story, or maybe even have deviated from the story in some ways, and set those in dialogue besides the texts themselves. And then towards the end, we'll have some opportunity to talk a little bit about the wider context in which the stories of the biblical matriarchs originated. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we are. So first of all, just to get a sense of where we are located in space when it comes to the stories of the matriarchs. The story of Abraham and Sarah, who at the time were named Abram and Sarai, begins in Ur. So if you can find Ur, they're sort of in the center towards the edge of the land there, that's marked out on the upper right. And they traveled a significant distance to what would eventually become the land of Israel. And so we're talking about a land that has a lot of different ecosystems in it, from sort of high desert to more fertile plains, down to the depths of the Dead Sea. And so if you look in the lower right map, you'll see marked out next to that body of water, Mamre and Hebron. Those are going to be important as we tell the story as well. So you can see a significant distance was traveled from Ur here to the lands that became the lands of the 12 tribes of Israel, named for the sons of Jacob. And if you have a question at any point, best bet is to go ahead and use the reaction button on your screen that gives you a chance to put a hand up. Since we're looking at a screen share, I won't necessarily see that somebody's going to unmute, but if you use the hand raise gesture, then that'll pop you up onto my screen so I can see that you have a question or a comment or something to share. So we start with Sarah. And so let's turn in our Bibles to Genesis chapter 11, beginning with the 27th verse. And this passage will continue on into the 12th chapter to the 20th verse. And so I'm wondering if somebody would be willing to read at least some of that aloud. If you don't want to read all of it, go ahead and pause and we'll let another voice take up where you leave off.
Well, I'll start with the 27th verse.
Beautiful,
This
thank
is
you.
Tom. So I'll go through like maybe the beginning at 12.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Now, these are the descendants of Terah. Terah was the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran was the father of Lot. Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans. Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarai was barren; she had no child. Terah took her son Abram and his grandson Lot, son of Haran, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, his son Abram's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran.
All right. Someone be willing to pick up with the next.
I'll read, Bobby. It's Terry.
Thank you.
The Lord said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's house. Hold and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old, and when he set out for Haran, he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan and arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Morah at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Someone else would like to take over.
Thanks, Terry.
I can do that. This is Kathy.
Thank you.
Although now I picked my finger up. What sentence were we on?
Start with number 8.
There we go. He moved on from there to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent between Bethel to the west and Al-Aya to the east. He built an altar there and prayed to God. Abraham kept moving, steadily making his way south to the Negev. Then a famine came to the land. Abraham went down to Egypt to live. It was a hard famine. As he drew near to Egypt, he said to his wife, Sarai, look, we both know that you're a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they're going to say, ah, that's his wife, and kill me. But they'll let you live. Do me a favor. Tell them you're my sister. Because of you, they'll welcome me and let me live. And I'll pass it off.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, I can pick it up if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, manservants and maidservants, and camels. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and on his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. "What have you done to me?" he said. "Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to stop the share for a moment so we can see each other's faces. What stood out to you? We're talking about two stories that are one right into the next. The first is the story of the calling of Abram and Sarai. And then as they travel further and further south, then there is this story of their encounter with the Egyptian Pharaoh. So in either of those two stories, what stood out for you? Tom.
It's been pointed out to me that the path from Ur to up and then down to Egypt follows the path of the Fertile Crescent. So that's just one thing I wanted to note. And then more importantly, we don't hear from Sarai. So we don't know how we don't know explicitly how she feels as the sister, as opposed to a bride, as opposed to a wife.
Right. Thank you for both of those comments. And that is, I think, an important observation that we have this rather unusual scene of some tension between Abram and the Egyptian Pharaoh, or possible tension or perceived possible tension. And Sarai is asked to misstate or misrepresent her relationship with Abram. And as you say, she really doesn't have a voice in this passage. She, as far as we know, did what she was asked, and then events unfolded as they did from there. So, any other observations or things that stood out for other folks?
I think for me, Bobbi, one of the things that has always struck me was the fact that Sarai was used as a barter, not as a person, but as a way for Abram to get what he wanted, regardless of how she may have felt. And so that's always been a bother for me. And the fact that Abram would allow his wife, someone who he supposedly loves and cares for, be taken into Pharaoh's household and compromised.
Yeah.
What I noted was that she was blamed for everyone, the household becoming ill.
This is Cheryl, and an old saying came to my mind reading this. You've heard the saying about a man hiding behind a woman's skirts. In a sense, I feel like Abraham was doing that. He was afraid for himself, and so he was hiding behind Sarah and really put her in a place of danger. And Pharaoh was the man of integrity because he did not compromise her. And that has always struck me, that even a man of faith like Abraham, a great leader, makes mistakes.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate your sharing kind of your interpretation of what you do with that, because that was my next question for the whole group. So what do we do with this troubling story of what Sarah is asked to do, the compromise of their marriage, and so on? What do we do with that? And I think one of the takeaways, as Cheryl said, is that we're not talking about perfect people, we're talking about people, but people who were called and blessed by God all the same. But I am all ears for other ways that you think about this story or resolve it, what you do with it.
Well, if I may say, I have participated in Christian religious traditions where there's an important part of how they approach life as a Christian is, quote unquote, where the man is the spiritual head of the family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have textual evidence for that, but for my statement here, but I've always thought that that is rooted in the sort of patriarchy that we see here, where, you know, people who come from this perspective in the wider Christian church would say, well, you look at the great men of faith in the Old Testament and they were the boss, so I am. And I mean, I want to be clear, that isn't the way I approach my wife. I'm just saying that there are people in the wider Christian community who do come from that perspective. And I mean, I think it's just a fact that that you can use scripture similar to this to bolster or to protect your position.
Beautifully said. Thank you. That's a wonderful observation. One of the things I want to lift up for you is that this is the first of the journeys of the chosen people into Egypt on account of a famine or other kind of crisis, but it's certainly not the last, right? So we have Joseph's brothers going to Egypt because they hear that there's food there when there's a famine in their own land. We have then much later when an angel comes to Joseph and says, you need to take Mary and the child and flee because Herod wants to kill the baby. They go into Egypt. And so there's this interesting sort of, if you think about the scriptures as a work of music, it's like a symphony, right? There is this motif of going into Egypt when there's trouble or crisis, when there's famine or threats. And so Egypt is it's a foreign place, but in some ways it's also a place of at least temporary refuge. So hang on to that in the back of your mind as we move forward here. I want to share some images from the story of Abram and Sarai, and see what you have to say about those. I'm wondering if I can move that at all. So are you seeing just the image, or are you seeing my taskbar as well?
Just the image, Bobbi.
Oh, God bless us. Okay, so this is a lithograph that is a print that is made from ink laid on stone in a press by Marc Chagall. Chagall was a Jewish artist who was, as a child, lived in Russia, and most of his adult life lived in France and specifically Paris. And so he spent his entire artistic career really celebrating in art, both paintings and lithographs, the people of the Bible, his spiritual ancestors and biological ancestors to a certain extent. So this is just Abraham and Sarah, no particular story referenced, but I'm going to ask you to share with me what you see, what stands out, what you notice.
I'm questioning what the image is in the upper left-hand corner. What is that representing?
Well, I'm going to turn that back to you. What does it look like?
This is Kathy. I
Yeah.
see a camel on a journey.
Yeah.
And you were suggesting that this was their first trip through Egypt. And I don't know if that's the significance or not, but that made me think of traveling.
Yeah, I felt the wavy line represented perhaps the travel.
And of the two people, Sarah is the dominant person.
Yeah. Now, why might that be?
It's that
Well,
image of
she is a catalyst. She is a catalyst of the action.
Yeah.
And then I'll also just note that it appears like Abraham, the figure of Abraham is perhaps resting his hand on her shoulder.
Yes. What would you suggest is perhaps the significance of that gesture?
Well, it's just interesting to me that the artist would do that because on some levels in the passage he repudiates her, and yet in this frame it would seem to me like that's a loving gentle gesture, maybe, or maybe you could see it as possessive.
I actually see her eyes cast down, so it may be him encouraging her to do something she's not really excited about.
Yes, I see her hand at her throat, signaling, fear or grief, perhaps.
I would invite you actually to take the pose that you see Sarai taking. So with her hand at the base of her throat, with the position of her head and her eyes, and just see how that feels for a moment. What do you think? What kind of emotional space does she seem to be in given her posture and gesture?
When I look at this picture and when I do this, I see humble obedience. To me, her hand looks like a dove. And there is such peace in humbly being obedient to our master, who is our Lord and Savior. And she was being obedient to her husband, who was considered her master at that time. So I see a sense of peace, even though she may had qualms about what she was being asked to do. That simple humility, peace of submission.
Thank you for that. Any other observations about anything you see in the image?
That hand gesture to me looks like protection, gesture of fear, anxiety, uncertainty about what is going on here.
Thank you, Bruce. The wonderful thing about visual art is that it is polyvalent, which means that it can speak in many voices at once. And so we may well be looking at a very powerful image of humble submission, of peace. We may also be looking at a certain amount of anxiety and fear. And this image, the power in it, it's a fairly simple image, but the power in it is that it can speak a variety of possible emotions and attitudes all at the same time.
And Bobbi, if I may, if you take that white space above her head, I mean, if you look at that, I'm sort of wondering if she is bathed in light.
I like that. I like that.
Because her shoulders are also in light. And then I would also just note that if indeed that she is bathed in light, then Abraham isn't.
Hmm.
He is in shadow.
Interesting.
There was quite a spread in the age between Abraham and Sarah, right?
He was a fair amount older than her, I believe. Yes. But Tom, you've given a wonderful segue to the next question I was going to ask, and that is, what do you make of the color? It's a very limited palette, but why do you think Chagall chose these shades of blue with the spaces of white? Tom's given us a wonderful interpretation of the spaces of white, and the shadowy sense that we see with the darker colors around Abram. What else might you say about the colors? Don't all speak at once.
Blue is often an emotion.
Yeah.
Right. Sadness or melancholy.
Mhm. Good. Thank you. Let me go to next slide that I have with my. Okay, so we're actually just going to move into the next part of Abram and Sarai's story. So if someone would be willing to read just the first 6 verses of Genesis 16.
I can read that.
Thank you.
Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I'm suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her.
Thank you, Lynn. What stands out to you from this story?
Well, now Sarai has a voice.
Yes, she does.
I don't know that it serves her well, but she has a voice.
And she turns tables on Abraham. It's almost a reverse of the previous story.
Say more about that, Enton.
In the previous episode, Going to Egypt, Abraham was the actor and, in a sense, gave Sarah away. And in this story, Sarah is the actor and tells Abraham what he's to do, and in a sense gives him away, even though it circles back and says, "This is all your fault," even though she's the one that told him what to do. So we get a really different picture of Sarah.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Other observations about this passage?
Well, I think she's angry,
Mm.
probably because of all the things that have been happening to her. And so she's finally able to express some of that anger inappropriately, but I think that's a lot of what's going on behind the scenes is that she's angry at everything. And now she has to deal with the fact that not only did she not have children, but here's someone who's coming in to give her husband what she can't give her.
Another really fraught, kind of tense situation, really, for Sarah in particular, as well as certainly for Hagar, who does not have a voice in this passage. Other observations about it?
I was going to mention Hagar and the fact that she had no choice. And then she was treated harshly, so much so that she fled, even though she may have acted arrogantly against Sarah, her mistress. She was a pawn in this story, and she had no choice, and she had no voice.
Thank you. I have an image to share with you, as you might expect. There we go. What do you notice? What stands out?
Well, the artist made Sarah look old.
Yeah.
Compared to Hagar, and even compared to Abram.
Yeah.
This is kind of heart-wrenching for me as I look at Hagar in this situation, humiliated, having no choice, and yet looking ahead to the rest of the story, we know how deeply God cared for her, but what a place to be.
Thank you. The artist has really given us a image of, with the understanding that for Hagar, this was not a consensual arrangement, right?
See the similarities with the previous picture. Abram has his hand on her shoulder. Hagar's in the same pose that Sarai had been in. Sarai didn't learn her lesson from what had happened to her, that she would put someone else through that.
That's a powerful observation. And I don't know if Chagall would have known this painting at all, but you're absolutely right. The gestures are very, very similar. And we know just from our own time and human psychology that sometimes hurt people, right? They visit.
Right.
This is how I would interpret the verse about how the sins of the fathers are visited to the children of the third and fourth generation. It's not a punishment coming from God so much as that's the way generational trauma unfolds, right?
Exactly.
Any other observations about this image?
With Abraham, he's being dismissive of Sarah, but also of Hagar. Just his posture and the hand up is just like, it's almost like he's saying, well, you arranged this, so just a dismissive type of posture.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's interesting to me that in the dynamic of the interaction that Sarai is much more modest than the other two images.
Yeah.
I'm also aware of the European skin tone.
Yes, indeed.
I think this also shows Sarah's desperation, because women's importance and value were based upon the fact that they could have children. And yeah, she must have been very desperate to have done this.
That's a powerful observation. Thank you. And even just the way she's posed and sort of leaning in with her hand to her chest, we almost have the sense of motion from her, right? She's moving forward. She's needing something. Yeah. Whereas the other two figures are more still.
She's pleading.
Yes. Yes. Good.
Someone had mentioned a sense of modesty in Sarai, and I guess to me, I what I was feeling was, I don't know if it's an opposite or just a different way of looking at it, but that Hagar is very vulnerable.
Yes.
The vulnerable one in this.
I think this artist has done really a masterful job of presenting sort of the tensions and the unequal power differentials and the relationships amongst the three figures, without, explicitly showing us what happened. We know what happened, right? Let's go on to some more scriptures. Someone be willing to read a handful of verses from Genesis 17.
Abraham 17:15-21. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of people shall come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, "Can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who's 90 years old, bear a child?" And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight." God said, "No, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year."
Thank you, Bruce. And I just want to pause there because the names here are important. So does anybody know the meaning of the names Sarai and Sarah? They're very closely related, as you might expect. So Sarai is typically translated as sort of chieftainess, so sort of the wife of a tribal chieftain, whereas Sarah is princess, so she has been elevated to a status of over a much larger group of people as a royal figure. And the name Isaac means laughter. And so the laughter that both of his parents experienced when they were told that he would be born becomes his identity. Would someone read Genesis 18? And again, since this is about 15 verses, if you want to pause in the middle and have another voice take up, that's totally fine.
I'll read through 6.
Beautiful.
The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, when he was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. Let me get you something to eat, so that you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3, is it says?
That works.
of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread."
Thank you. Someone pick up at verse 7.
I'll do that. Then Abraham ran to the cattle pen and picked out a nice plump calf and gave it to the servant, who lost no time getting it ready. Then he got curds and milk, brought them with the calf that had been roasted, set the meal before the men, and stood there under the tree while they ate. The men said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "In the tent." One of them said, "I'm coming back about this time next year. When I arrive, your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah was listening at the tent opening just behind the man. Abraham and Sarah were old by this time, very old. Sarah was far past the age for having babies. Sarah laughed within herself. "An old woman like me get pregnant with this old man of a husband?" God said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Me, have a baby'? Old woman like me. Is anything too hard for God? I'll be back about this time next year, and Sarah will have a baby." Sarah lied. She said, "I didn't laugh," because she was afraid. But he said, "Yes, you did. You laughed." If somebody else wants to go on.
That's a good place to stop, actually. Thank you. So what stands out to you about this part of Sarah's story?
We often hear about Sarah laughing, but seldom do we hear about Abraham, that he laughed also.
Yeah. Thank you. What else do you notice, or what stands out from this reading?
The disbelief.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, I guess I would have to be a little bit pernickety there and just say that it's a reasonable disbelief.
Absolutely.
I mean, I would disbelieve, okay?
I got stuck on the 3 visitors.
Mm.
It says men came to visit, but yet, in a way, I almost have to wonder, were they angels? First of all, they had information nobody else would have known, but they didn't distinguish them as that. So that was my rabbit hole.
Good, yeah.
And I want to tag on to that because the text identifies 3 individuals, and yet Abraham addresses them in the singular, my Lord.
Curiouser and curiouser.
That certainly makes us think of the Trinity, doesn't it? God in 3 persons.
Right. And I would hope that you also hear echoes and resonances with a much later story of a miraculous conception, right? Because isn't that more or less what Mary asks Gabriel? How can this be? That same disbelief? Yeah.
I also think it's important to point out Abraham disbelieved at first too.
Yep.
Many sermon writers or commentators I've seen take compare Abraham's belief to Sarah's disbelief, and it doesn't really feel like a fair comparison.
Starting with the epistolary writers, Paul talks about how Abraham's faith was reckoned to him as righteousness, right? So that gets emphasized right away in the Christian story.
Verse 14 is so important. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I think that gives all of us hope when we point to that.
Amen. Thank you. Any other noticings before we go to pictures?
I go back to verse 9, where Abram's asked, "Where is Sarah, thy wife?" I wonder if this isn't a test going back to, our first passage where, he encourages Sarah to lie and say who she is. So I kind of wonder if this isn't a little bit of a test to Abraham to kind of see what his response is going to be in comparison to earlier.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I'm also, as you're speaking, Laura, thinking that there's resonances even with the story of our first parents, right? When they realize that they're naked, they hide, and God is asking, "Where are you, Adam?" Right? So this sense of the omniscient God asking where people are who are in an interesting position in their relationship with God at that moment. Good.
I think that there's a real big emphasis here on hospitality.
Yes.
Details in preparation for a meal outdo some of the statements about the other individuals. And so there's a great deal of fellowship and respect for one another and just meeting of the minds.
Yeah, thank you. And do you notice also what is served? So bread and tender calf and curds and milk. So this is before the kashrut laws are given to the Israelite people. So they're mixing meat and milk, which they would not be allowed to do. Their descendants would not be allowed to do. All right, so someone mentioned that the three figures are very reminiscent of the Trinity. This is an icon that is about 500 or 600 years old. Making that exact connection. What do you notice? What stands out?
The halos around three figures indicating the holiness of God.
And if you look closely, Abraham and Sarah have halos as well.
They're of course in the text, I mean, the wings are more of a recent phenomenon.
Say more about that.
Well, I'm not familiar. I mean, I'm not some huge, biblical scholar, but I mean, I'm not too sure I can immediately think of a place in Scripture where angels are specifically said to have wings.
Ah, yes. Very good point.
I mean, but I stand under correction if somebody knows something that I don't know.
So where the word is translated angels, you're right. There is in Isaiah a description of seraphim that have wings, and not just two wings, 6. They have wings that cover their eyes and wings that cover their feet, and then the wings that they fly with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very curious creatures indeed.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but the word for but that word is a different word than angel, correct?
You are exactly right. Yep.
Right.
So we see already in the artistic tradition that angel, generic angel, is a human figure with two wings at the shoulders.
Mhm.
What else do you notice?
I noticed the cloth that is not covering the table, but yet comes up to the sides. It looks almost like a prayer shawl.
Mm. That's powerful.
And the table reminds me of the communion table, the bread and the cup.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. This is clearly a Christian artist who is really drawing those connections between the Genesis story and Christian Eucharist.
Who has a guess of what those buildings are in the background?
Oh, what do you think?
I'm not sure.
I tell my college students that there really aren't any wrong answers in art because of the polyvalency of it. So feel free to speculate.
It could be that it's a reference to something that the artist sees on a regular basis, a building in his time, and he's placed these figures there. It also looks like there's some, I can't, because of the size of it, I can't see exactly, but there's some kind of a design on the right side and some orange coming up behind the left-sided building.
Good eye, Terry. And this is clearly not a tent, right?
And
That's what
I guess I associate those trees with Greece.
Yeah. Very Mediterranean kinds of foliage there.
And when I first looked at it, I was thinking inside, but then because of the trees and then because of those whatever they are in the background, I have to wonder, are they outside?
I found myself wondering if those buildings, which they look like, are a reference to the next story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Bobbi, the verse 4 and 18 does refer to a tree.
Yep.
Mhm.
True. Yeah. Oh.
So when we're looking at icons in particular from the Eastern Orthodox tradition, there's often a very much a both-andness to it. So not just polyvalency, but a really very deliberate sense in which this is almost both an interior space and an exterior space. That it's both the three mysterious figures that visited Abraham and Sarah and the Trinity, that it's both the meal that they were served and the Eucharist. And that's all very intentional. Any other observations about this image?
But Bobbi, I did notice that not only behind the building on the left, but also the seated figure on the left has that same sort of circular orangish pattern, but it seems like almost the same color as what Sarah's robe is, and that what she's holding has that same kind of coloration to it.
Very interesting. What do you make of that?
I have no idea.
Okay. Fair enough.
I haven't done my art history studies in a long time.
All
What-
right.
What does the Greek say between the two trees?
What does the Greek say between the two trees?
Do you know?
I don't.
Okay.
I should. Tell you what, I will look that up and I will get back to you. If not during the time we have together, I'll share that with the group following the class.
Great.
I'll share it with Kendra to share it with y'all. Thank you for that question. All right, let's go to a Western version. Not too far separated in time. What do you notice?
Well, there's a lion sitting at Abram's feet.
Yeah, what's that about?
Probably imagery for God.
Okay. I think there's another possibility, but I'll let y'all sit with that for a moment before I spill the beans. Not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying there's more than one possibility.
Oh, yeah.
Could be both at once. What else do you notice?
Well, they're situated in permanent structures and not mobile tents.
They sure are.
And
And
there's
the angel seems to me pretty, I mean, the angel looks to me like, you know, as a gendered person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the theological understanding of angels is that they do not have gender, but here we are.
And Abraham's costume to me seems to be very, very Turkish.
Mm. Yeah.
yet Sarah's is very Danish.
Hmm. Well, with regard to the lion in the foreground, recall that God, or the angelic figure, the promise to Abraham and Sarah was not just that a child would be born to them, but that Abraham would be the father of many nations. And the lion is associated with Judah. And so I would argue that perhaps one of the meanings of that lion is that this is sort of a foreshadowing of some of Abraham's descendants becoming the nation of Judah.
I also noticed there's sort of a dark winged figure behind the white clad individual. And I can't tell whether that's a wing for the angel or if that's a separate being back there. If we're talking about the Trinity.
What do the rest of you think? I would be inclined to say that that's probably the angel's wing, and that this artist has chosen to focus, and as Bruce noted, the that Abraham addresses the figure in the singular, whereas the Eastern Orthodox artist really plays up the three figures that we meet at the beginning of that passage. But I'm all ears for other possibilities.
Note that there was a similar dark shadow behind the angel's right arm. So maybe that's the other wing.
I can see that. Any other noticings about this image?
Bobbi, can you identify what's in the pot on the top of the wall?
Oh, goodness. Not with any reliability as far as a specific. Yep. Sorry.
Not a problem. I just know
Okay.
that in a lot of these, everything is a symbol of something. I'm just not sure what.
Yep. That it's often the plants or trees that are depicted or specific species that have symbolic meaning. Oh, yeah. All right, let me move on.
And Bobbi,
back up.
I'm sorry, one last thing, please. Notice Sarah is smiling.
Yeah. Do you think that's maybe the internal laughter that we read about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love seeing which details artists choose to pick up on and how they choose to depict that. I think that's so fascinating.
I was wondering about the scale of the lion in relation to the people in the picture.
Yes, well, about that. One of the things that is very, very common in medieval and Renaissance art in particular is scale being a highly variable thing. A lot of, especially the artistic commissions that were made for churches and so forth, will have, you know, relatively large scale images of Christ and Mary and the saints and so on. And then on the same panel, little teeny tiny images of the donors kneeling with their hands folded in prayer. And so you have this sort of odd sense that we have, you know, giants and pygmies in the same space. But it's really just an artistic convention that keeping scale consistent isn't necessarily a priority, right? So
yeah. And I wondered if that might be, like you said, the foreshadowing of the Lion of Judah, not something happening in the present, but the looking down the road at what was to come.
that's where I would go with that anyway. So thank you. So we're just past the top of the hour. And so let me ask of you before we move ahead, if you would like to take a short break now. I do have one or two more images of this particular scene, so we can carry on with those and take our break in a bit, or we can take it now, whatever gives you joy.
In a bit. Let's see the
Okay.
Let's wrap this part up.
Carolyn has spoken. All right. I'm not seeing a lot of dissent there, so let's do it. So now we come to a different medium. This is an etching by Rembrandt. What do you notice? What stands out?
The child with the bow.
Mm-hmm.
Noticing in this piece and the previous one, Sarah at this point is much more in the background than she was in the first painting.
Mm.
Or at least that's what I think I'm remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a very solid tent.
Yes, quite.
But a bit less European in the visuals of the individuals.
I'm still stuck with that Bowman. Who is he supposed to be?
Well, what do you think?
Is complete in terms of the exclusively with the passage. It's totally extraneous unless it's one of the servants, but I don't know.
That's how I would read him. Go ahead.
I was wondering if that was Ishmael. I'm not sure of how much time has passed, but that was my original thought.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Mhm.
It does say that Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender young calf, and gave it to a younger man to prepare. So perhaps that represents the servant, the younger man that was preparing that.
I think that's where I'd go with it, but again, it's open to interpretation. So.
Excuse me, this is Linda. I just noticed that the three visitors are so different in appearance and age.
Mm.
And only one has wings.
Two have wings. The one on the left, the one in the middle, but the older gentleman doesn't appear to have wings.
Ah, yeah, now we see the wings on the left. Right. Yeah, good call.
But yeah, I was struck by the ages and what appears to be possibly different ethnicities.
Mm.
Well, which one do you think is supposed to be Abraham?
I was just going to ask that.
I say the guy with the picture at the bottom.
Mm.
Well, and we had the comment last time about angels typically being non-gendered. In the previous painting, the angel did seem non-gendered to me, but here it seems very gendered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that facial hair does kind of make you think of a male. That's true.
Oh, goodness.
And scripture does say 3 men, so they were in appearance as men, apparently.
Anything else stand out to you from this image?
The figure in the background, the Sarah figure, again has her hand to her breast.
Hmm. Hmm. It also almost becomes, across the various chapters of her story, an artistic convention in depicting Sarah at this point.
Maybe that shows she's laughing.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to hold it in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
These crazy old men, you know.
Oh, goodness. Right.
If we think of Abraham being the man with the pitcher, his head is bowed, like he's very humbled to be in the presence and to be serving these others.
Reference.
Yeah. Good eyes, y'all. Here we come to a version by Chagall. What do you notice? What stands out?
There's no Abraham.
Yeah, interesting.
The trumpet coming out of the left-hand angel's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So not just the wings that are the typical attribute of angels in the artistic tradition, but also the musical instruments.
Mm-hmm. And Sarah's head is bowed almost in a reverence to them.
Yeah, go ahead and take that pose with your hands in the same sort of gesture that she's got going on too, and see how that feels to you.
Feels like a position of prayer or supplication.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Worship.
Bet.
And possibly clapping with joy.
You bet. I like all this. It's good stuff.
And you said back in 17 that Sarah means princess, and here she has a crown.
Yes.
Also, the positioning of the angel's hands. I mean, the one is holding the trumpet, the other one is down towards the torso, but the other one has its arms raised up.
Yeah.
Rather than that being a musical instrument, when I look at that, I think of a scroll and the word of God coming out of the mouths of those that are speaking.
I'll buy that.
Sure.
That's in medieval art in particular. That is a long-standing tradition in the artistic depictions, is to have the scrolls with the words that are being spoken, often actually calligraphed onto them. What do you make of the color palette of this lithograph?
I suspect he used the orangish yellows as more of a fiery representation of the holy.
Yep.
In addition to the fieriness, it feels very grounded to me with some of the earthy tones.
Mm-hmm.
The earth tones.
And Bobbi, is that a tree underneath the wing of the one angel on the
I think
left?
so, yes. Good eye.
And I'm sort of wondering if that hump between, it appears to my eye, the hump that appears between Sarah and the angels, if maybe that's some sort of an altar. I don't know.
I think it could be read that way.
Or it could be Abraham bending over. Is that what you were going to say, Anton?
Oh, just falling out of the picture, yeah.
Yeah.
I would also associate that bright reddish orange color of the angels with joy, especially given that, you know, we maybe have a trumpet or a scroll, but also the arms in the air and Sarah's posture that this is not just laughter, but just joy. Any other thoughts
It
on
is
this?
joy. Maybe Sarah is dancing and clapping.
Could very well be. You bet. Yeah.
And where her mouth was drawn in the first depiction of her and Abram, here her mouth is open, as if she is laughing.
Beautiful. Right.
And her eyes soft.
That's a good place for us to take a short break. Turn back to Anton, the timekeeper.
Yeah, I'll just put a 5-minute timer on the screen. So that way you can glance at your screen, know how much. So get up, stretch, take a break, and come back for more, because Bobbi, it's clear you've got us all engaged here. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, friends. I'll see you in a bit.
just mute your camera and mic if you wish, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Well, I think I'll stop share and we'll just begin to pull back together here. And so, Bobbi, we don't quite have critical mass. I don't want too many people to be left behind. So
okay,
hopefully we'll, It's time.
Fair enough. Thank you. Well, friends, I don't know about you, but I'm having a great time. You have so many wonderful observations and insights into both the texts and the images. And I hope that this has been interesting and engaging and maybe even enlightening and insightful for you as well. So thank you for your participation and your sharings. This is great. So
Yeah. So Bobbi, where are you going to take us next?
where am I going to take you next? Well, we're still with Sarah. And we're now going to move to Genesis 20. So if one or two or three voices could read the first 18 verses of that, that would be really peachy.
From there, Abraham journeyed toward the region of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While residing in Gerar as an alien, Abraham said to his wife Sarah, "She is my sister." And King Abimelech of Gezer sent and took her Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "You are about to die because of the woman who you have taken, for she is a married woman." Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent people?" Did he not himself say to me, "She is my sister"? And she herself said, "He is my brother." I did this in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands. Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart. Furthermore, it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all that are yours." So that's through 7.
Thank you. Another voice to pick up at 8.
Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all his officials, and when he told them all that had happened, they were very much afraid. Then he called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you have brought such great guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done things to me that should not be done." And he asked Abraham, "What was your reason for doing this?" Abraham replied, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she really is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not of my mother, and she became my wife. And then God had wandered from my father's household. I said to her, this is how you can show your love to me. Everywhere we go, say of me, he is my brother." I'll let someone else take over the last.
Thanks, Terry. We're at verse 14 to start.
Then Abimelech took sheep, oxen, and male and female servants, and gave them to Abraham, and he restored Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, "See, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you." Then to Sarah he said, "Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Indeed, this vindicates you before all who are with you and before everybody." Thus she was rebuked. So Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children. For the Lord had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
Thank you, friends. So what stands out to you from this passage? What do you make of it?
Well, we find out that Abraham and Sarah really are related in a brother-sister way. So he wasn't exactly lying as he went through the scriptures, even though he didn't go into a lot of detail.
But it sounds like they had this agreement from the beginning of the start of their journey, even before they went into Egypt, so that maybe our understanding of Sarah's response at that time might be colored now by looking at it from this end of the story, that they had already had this agreement, that this was how they were going to travel through these foreign nations.
Thank you. And isn't that interesting that the writers and redactor chose to give us this information in this order, right? We don't find out right away the whole backstory. Any other observings about this passage? All right.
It's very interesting to me that in this episode end up with being gifted and extravagantly gifted.
So perhaps somewhat ethically questionable, but it becomes the way that Abraham increases his wealth.
It's also clear that God speaks to other people, and there are other people that are very faithful to God.
Yeah, thank you for that, Enton. That's an important noticing in this passage, I think. Right. So Chagall has done it again. Whoops. I'm going to do that.
It looks good on our end, Bobbi.
Okay, good. What do you notice? What stands out here?
Well, you have the orange color once again for the divine, for the holy, coming to them.
And that's a particular artistic convention as well, that angels that and seraphim specifically, even though these guys don't have the 6 wings, are associated with the color red, and then cherubim with blue, and so on and so forth. So you'll see that in other European artists.
I see this as representing Abimelech with Sarah in their bed, and God watching over and protecting both of them, so that Sarah wasn't taken advantage of, that Abimelech did not sin against her. And to us, God's ever awareness and presence with us, watching over us.
Yeah, thank you for that, because it really was protecting them both. I think that's important to know. What else do you notice, or what stands out?
I'm assuming the clouds under the angelic figure are to indicate it was a dream sequence.
Good. Anything else stand out from this image?
Well, Sarah's not an ugly old crone in this one.
Sarah's eyes are wide open, but it looks to me like Abimelech's are closed, or at least downcast.
Closed or mostly closed. Yeah, I see that too.
Well, I was going to say that it looks like they're having a heart-to-heart. The way Abimelech is gesturing with his left hand.
Yeah.
And he certainly has her attention.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, and Sarah is naked and Abimelech is fully dressed.
Right up to the crown, isn't he?
Yep.
Any other noticings about this image?
Just all the curvy lines give me a fluffy, soft feeling.
I like that. Thank you for that.
Well, if I remember my art history right, Chagall does a lot of floating figures in his works. So the fact that it's almost as though they're floating on a bed, but we also have the floating cloud, and the God figure is floating, is pretty typical of his style.
For sure. Yeah, thanks, Terry.
And then as you move your eye down and to the left, you get more real to the point where you see perhaps the tiles of the floor of a bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
I can see that. Good, good, good. All right. More scripture. I want to take us at least to the first several verses of Genesis 21.
I can.
Thank you.
Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him, and God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, and I have borne him a son in his old age.
Thank you. Someone pick up at verse 8.
The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, playing with the son Isaac. So she said to Abraham, cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit along with my son Isaac. The matter was very distressing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be named for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba.
Thank you. What stands out from this part of the story?
I think a different type of laughter from Sarah, not laughing in jest, but laughing with joy.
Yeah, for sure. This is the, you have turned my morning into dancing, into laughter, that kind of joy. Yeah, thank you.
Reminds me of the phrase separate but not equal.
Yeah. With regard to Isaac and Ishmael, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other observations or noticings about the passage? Let's look at some pictures. What do you notice in this etching?
Well, we don't see the faces of Hagar or Ishmael. We just see their backs.
Mm.
And I'm guessing that we're back to looking really old for Sarah as she peers around the column with a small child attached to her hip.
Yeah.
Hagar seems to be crying.
I see a tear on Hagar's face.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I note that the boy appears to have perhaps a bow or something on his that says something about the previous etching that looked like it took place in the same stone-built tent.
Yes, thank you, Enton.
I'm seeing over there on the left, not only is Sarah peeking out from the archway, but on further left, there is a little boy there. I'm assuming it's Isaac. But then the funny thing I was thinking about was we have a dog here instead of a lion this time. And that made me see the boy.
Oh, wow. So what do you make of the dog?
I don't know, man's best friend.
In Christian art, dogs often have one of two symbolisms. So somebody tell me what's a very sort of popular, basic, well-known name for a dog? What's kind of the quintessential dog name?
Fido.
Fido. What does Fido mean? Do we know?
Faithful.
Yeah, so dogs are often a symbol of faith. So let's sit with that for a moment. In what way might this dog be a symbol of faith? And if so, whose faith?
It looks to me like the dog is following Hagar, Ishmael, going with them.
Well, then the flip side of that is that faith is leaving the household.
The other place that we see dogs in the artistic tradition in Christian art specifically is in scenes of Christ's passion. So either the torture or specifically often the torture, the whipping and so forth, the flagellation. And there the dogs are more of a symbol of almost unfaith or of the animalistic nature of the torturers, right? But typically in those kinds of scenes, the dogs are pretty mean looking. This dog looks pretty gentle. So I like that interpretation that it's a symbol of faith, but faith that's leaving the house and following along with Hagar and Ishmael, because we know what happens next with them, right? Anybody call that to memory or glance ahead in your Bible?
Well, definitely God comes to Hagar. I'm wondering why Ishmael is full color.
Yeah, everyone else's clothing is mostly just an outline and his is shaded in,
going back to the dog, it reminds me of the New Testament passage where the woman has gone to the judge and then she says, even the little dogs receive the crumbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Syrophoenician woman who asked for her healing for her daughter from Jesus. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I want to revisit that noticing about how Ishmael's clothing is depicted and his hair as well. Where does your eye sort of get drawn to, and how does your eye move around this image?
Well, for me, it's drawn to Ishmael because he's bold in the front of the picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm seeing the shades of light and dark. He's the dark part of this picture. So my eye draws to him first and then kind of spreads out from there to the lighter.
Good. Any other noticings about this image?
Does I don't know if it's a noticing, but it's certainly a question. Does Rembrandt typically portray Abraham as Turkish in general, with a turban and all that?
So one of the things about Rembrandt is that he does try very hard to be very faithful to the biblical account. Not entirely, as we can see with the stone tent, right? But he also is very fascinated by Mediterranean or Oriental, in the Near East, Oriental dress. And so I think this was an opportunity for him to sort of show off his familiarity with those styles of dress, what was considered Oriental or Near Eastern in 17th century Amsterdam. Good question.
Another thing that I noticed, not exactly about him, but Sarah seems to have a smirking smile on her face as they're being cast out.
So echoes of that laughter from inside the tent when they're told that she will bear a son, but yet again, another sort of species of laughter. Yeah. Good. What do we notice about this sculptural grouping?
I was immediately struck by the ages. Ishmael is way taller.
Yeah.
So obviously in this one, a little older.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the contrast in color between Abraham, Sarah, and Ishmael from Hagar.
Yeah. I'm going to once again invite you to take the pose specifically of Hagar with the way her arms are positioned across her body. Maybe the way that her head is turned a bit to the side. See how that feels.
It looks to me that she's very unsettled about this particular turn of events.
Yeah.
Yeah, contemplation of what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
What I notice is I don't think we often think about the connection of Abraham with his son Ishmael. Tenderness depicted here that we don't often think of.
Yeah. Do you notice also the way Abraham's arms around his son are echoed in Hagar's arms around herself?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that?
That they're more alike than they are different. And historically, that's one of the reasons why Ishmael gets such a bad name. I think because he was cast out and he didn't have the favor of God, but yet God doesn't punish him for being who he is, and tells them he will be a great nation unto themselves, though Isaac's descendants are the favored ones. That there's a weird balance there, I think.
And our Muslim brothers and sisters consider Ishmael their father. So their connection to Abraham is through Ishmael. Yeah. One of the things to think about with regard to a sculptural grouping like this is that if you were to be at the Art Museum in Miami and walk around this grouping, the relationships among the figures would change. So the way we have it here in these photographs, we see Hagar kind of between Ishmael and Abraham and Sarah, but from another angle, Sarah would be between Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar. So what do you make of that?
Well, I guess if I sort of rotate it in my mind, let me see, low rotated left, I guess, so that I'm looking between the Abraham, Ishmael, and Hagar.
Mm-hmm.
Now Sarah is in some ways also cast out.
That's powerful.
Could it be that Abraham is showing love to Ishmael and not showing love to Hagar? And so she is crossing herself in the sense that, who loves me? I've been used, but because Ishmael is a son, and of course males are wanted more than.
Stop. Leave it.
Anyhow.
I think that's a very powerful observation. Yeah, thank you. Any other noticings or?
Yeah, following up with John, it makes me wonder if Abraham couldn't share because Sarah's watching with Hagar. I'm aware of the tender care where he took water and bread and provided that.
Yep. Good. Any other noticings or observations about this artwork?
Well, you've got a big dark stone, but as a background, as opposed to a tent or a building. It's a monolith, really.
What do you make of that?
Well, the first thing I thought of was 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, my head just goes there. I can't help it.
Well, bearing in mind, though, that Ishmael is considered the father of the Muslim people, could it also be a reference to the Kaaba?
Say more about that, Bobbi.
Yeah. So this is the Kaaba is basically a much more even and symmetrical, but large black stone at the center of the Mosque al-Haram in Mecca. And so it is the Kaaba itself is the focus point of all Muslim prayer. And it has several different resonances. So when it's believed to have been built or rebuilt by Abraham and Ishmael, actually. So I'm feeling stronger about this interpretation at God's command. And so when Muslims go on Hajj, on pilgrimage to Mecca, they circle the Kaaba 7 times. That's one of the parts of the Hajj. So that would be my take on this large black monolith.
When I look at this, I wonder, there seems to be so much emotion in this, at least for me. Where do I find myself in this picture, where do we find ourselves? Are we the one who pushed someone away? Are we the one that feels unloved? Are we the compassionate, loving father and son?
Beautiful, Cheryl. Thank you. I also note, and I wish I'd included it in a slide, but the hands of Abraham on Ishmael's back, to me, are very reminiscent of the hands of the father in Rembrandt's painting of The Return of the Prodigal Son, which is in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, Russia. And I think that's intentional on the part of the artist. Shall we go on? All right. Anybody willing to read, starting with the first verse of Genesis 23?
This is Linda. I can start.
Thank you.
Sarah lived 127 years. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, present-day Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham mourned for Sarah and wept. Then Abraham got up from mourning his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. I know I am only an outsider here among you, but sell me a burial plot so that I can bury my dead decently. The Hittites responded, why, you're no mere outsider here with us. You're a prince of God. Bury your dead wife in the best of our burial sites. None of us will refuse you a place for burial. Then Abraham got up, bowed respectfully to the people of the land, the Hittites, and said, if you're serious about helping me give my wife a proper burial, intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar. Ask him to sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, the one at the end of his land. Ask him to sell it to me at its full price for a burial plot with you as witnesses.
Thank you. Someone willing to pick up at verse 10?
I can do that.
Thank you.
And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Hephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, nay, my lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein, I give it thee in the presence of the sons of my people, give I it thee, bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. And he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, but if thou wilt give it, I pray thee, hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, I'll let someone finish that.
Thank you, Laura. Starting at verse 15.
I'll read.
Thank you.
Listen to me, my lord. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. But what is that between me and you? bury your dead. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron's field in
Machpelah.
yeah, near Mary, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the borders of the field, was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who had come to the gate of the city. Afterwards, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave in the field, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. Oof.
Thank you for reading. Some tongue-twisting place names there. What stands out to you from this story? We've come to the end of Sarah's story.
The border is very sort of, I mean, I imagine that as how a border would really go to the city gate, where people make suggestions and they say, oh, well, no, I can't accept this, really just take it. Oh, no, I need to pay you anyway. And so they just sort of work it through.
You sense that there's kind of a lot of arcane rules of etiquette and rank that are unspoken but are part of these transactions, yeah. Other noticings about the passage, things that stand out?
Well, once again, Sarah has no voice.
No.
We don't know how she died or exactly, so there's, in many ways, she's absent, but yet her presence fills the space.
Thanks for that, Terry. So there is in Talmud a tradition about Sarah's death, and that is because in the prior chapter, Genesis 22, is where we have the story of the Akedah, where Abraham is commanded to go to Mount Moriah and sacrifice Isaac, and at the last minute, God stays his hand, or the angel stays his hand, and a ram is provided in the thicket for the sacrifice. And it's such a troubling story in a lot of ways. The tradition in Talmud is that when Sarah learned what had happened, that was basically the cause of her death, that she just couldn't live with this knowledge of what Abraham had gone to do and been willing to do, even if he hadn't actually ended up having to do it. So I do have an image of the burial of Sarah. What do you see? What do you notice? Where is your eye drawn?
I'm drawn to the men escorting what I'm assuming is Abraham out of the cave. He's having one last look.
And the light on his face and the grief in the face.
I have an oddball question. Did
Let's
they
hear it.
really bury people standing up, or is this just the artist's rendition?
That's a good question, and I'm not entirely certain of the answer. She was indicated buried in the cave of Machpelah, and depending on how difficult it would have been to hew out a tomb niche, it's certainly easier to go shallow and upright rather than deep and horizontal, right? So that might be one rationale for it. But I don't think a whole lot is known about the burial practices of the very early ancient Israelites.
I was wondering if that was some nod to her and Abraham standing in the area where they were living, because they were foreigners.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the Hittite nation,
Okay.
yet they've been perceived in a very positive light.
I'll buy that. I like that. Any other noticings or observations about this image?
I'm struck by how evocative this is of many of the resurrection images.
Mm-hmm.
The stone not being rolled away, but being put in place, the cave, the light outside, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see that as being deliberate on the artist's part. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The passage to me makes it pretty clear that Abram has a very good relationship with these people with whom he's living, and that's echoed in the way those two men are holding him as he leaves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we ready to move on? Okay, we come to Rebekah. And we have a nice big chunk of scripture to read about Rebekah. Genesis 24. It's the whole chapter. How about I read some, and then if somebody wants to pick up in a bit, we'll do that. Now Abraham was old, advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his house, who had charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live, but will go to my country and to my kindred and get a wife for my son Isaac." The servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me back to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there." So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all kinds of choice gifts from his master. And he set out and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water. It was toward evening, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, "O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. I am standing here by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, 'Please offer your jar that I may drink,' and who shall say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master." Before he had finished speaking, there was Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, coming out with her water jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very fair to look upon, a virgin whom no man had known. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me sip a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she said, and quickly lowered her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw for your camels also until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. We're at verse 22.
I can read.
Thank you.
When the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weighing a beka and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. Then he asked, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She answered him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, born to Nahor." And she added, "We have plenty of straw and fodder, as well as room for you to spend the night." Then the man bowed down and worshiped the Lord, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives." The girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and had heard Rebekah tell what the man said to her, he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels near the spring. "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord," he said. "Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man went to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and fodder were brought for the camels, and water for him and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him, but he said, "I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say." "Then tell us," Laban said. So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master abundantly, and he has become wealthy. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, men servants and maid servants, and camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he has given him everything he owns. And my master made me swear an oath and said, 'You must not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but go to my father's family and to my own clan and get a wife for my son.' Then I asked my master, 'What if the woman will not come back with me?' He replied, 'The Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you can get a wife for my son from his own clan and from my father's family. Then when you go to my clan, you will be released from my oath. Even if they refuse to give her to you, you will be released from my oath."
Thank you. We're at verse 42, if someone would be willing to pick up.
"I came to you today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will only make successful the way I am going. I am standing here by the spring of water. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son." Before I had finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew. I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I said to her, Whose daughter are you? She said, The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then I bowed my head and worshiped the Lord and blessed the Lord. the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you will deal loyally and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so that I may turn either to the right hand or to the left.
Thanks,
Then
Bruce.
Laban and Bethuel answered, the thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak to you anything bad or good. Look, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. And the servant brought out jewelry and silver, gold, and garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Then he and his men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they rose in the morning, he said, send me back to my master. Her brother and her mother said, let the girl remain for us for a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go. But he said to them, do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey successful. Let me go that I may go to my master. And he said, we will call the girl and ask her. And they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? She said, I will. So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse, along with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of the foes. Then Rebekah and her maids rose up, mounted the camels, and followed the men. Thus the servants took Rebekah and went on his way.
Thank you. Now Isaac had come from Bilhah and was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out in the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up. And when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and said to the servant, who is the man over there walking in the field to meet us? The servant said, it is my master. So she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. So what did you notice, or what stood out to you from this passage?
The importance of hospitality to foreigners, to people who don't know.
Good.
And yet there is a necessity to marry among your own kind.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in comparison with Sarah, they make a point of gaining her consent.
Yes.
I was struck by Rebekah's simple willingness, servanthood. Now, the spirit, when she was asked for water, said yes and quickly ran down. Just a very kind of helpful, engaging is how she was portrayed.
And can you imagine how much water 10 camels would drink after a long journey?
But I also
strong too.
Riding the camels got water. It was just the servant and the camels, but not the other men until they got to the other house.
Oh, mercy.
I'm struggling a little bit with the theological significance of marrying from your own kind. And I'm struggling with that in the context of some of the work that some of us brethren these days are doing with multiracial relationships, varieties of heritage. Just struggling with some theological understanding there.
Thanks for sharing that, Bruce. I think that's important to sit with. And we know that the stories of the figures in scripture aren't always meant to be taken as exemplars, right? So, but there's some cultural context around that as well, in terms of the marriage and family practices of the cultures of the ancient Near East, and certainly endogamy was an important one amongst those cultures, not just the people that would become the Israelites and Judahites. So
I've noticed that in the when they describe Sarah and they describe Rebekah, they describe them as easy to look at. They're both pretty.
Yeah.
At the artist's depiction of them, they are not that pretty. So in the context of the world there, what does pretty mean? Is it just face, or is it figure? Is it clothes they wear? Is it what is it that makes them beautiful and easy to look at?
And that is so culturally constrained, right? You know, beauty in the eye of the beholder is definitely has to do with culture, certainly. And then when we're looking at the images, then we're filtering through at least one or more other cultures beyond the culture of the ancient Near Eastern world as well. So it gets sort of convoluted and complicated. But I think unless others have burning observations to share, and we can bring those in along the way, let's go to the pictures, because I think we'll find that the artists were much more generous to Rebekah than they have been to Sarah. So the name that is often given to the servant who is sent to find the wife is Eliezer. What do we notice, or what stands out in this picture?
We've talked about this on several pictures, but where is Sarah, or where is Rebekah's hand?
So what do you think that gesture connotes in this context?
Who, me? But also that servitude, maybe.
I am your servant. Yep. What else do you notice?
She's in royal blue.
Yeah.
The woman with the green seems to be almost disapproving of what's going on.
Yeah, the varying crowd reactions are very interesting, aren't they?
We don't see any camels. We don't see any in any of Eleazar's retinue. But the proposal comes in the context of community.
Yeah, nice. Any other observings about this image?
The wall is often seen as the social gathering place for women. That was where they could talk and chat and gossip or whatever they wanted to do. And so to me, the gal in the green is just relaxed and observing things, like has been said, and could be talking about things, whatever, but at any rate.
In this picture, there are many women, but Rebekah was chosen because of her servant heart.
Beautiful. Here's another version. Italian artist, some years later. What do we see here? What stands out?
Now the figure of the looks like almost a fountain to the lower right-hand corner.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like a griffin of some sort with a hoof.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And she's in blue again.
Indeed.
Camels.
She looks very European,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Middle Eastern.
And she's higher than the man.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
She's talking down to the man.
Hmm.
I guess I look at that more like he's not being submissive, but more as, are you the one?
Hmm.
He's basically getting into a conversation and just doing his questioning to see if she's the one.
Sort of waiting on the word of the Lord there. Yeah. Good.
I love those camels.
Are they wonderful?
I've noticed that in many of the portraits, the woman will have her hand over her heart.
Mhm.
Some kind of a protection, I believe, is to protect yourself, your heart, your middle, your torso. And this one in particular, her hand, the way she's open is looks like assuredness.
Yeah. Do you see any pictorial resonances with any other biblical stories in this particular image?
Well, you could say the woman at the well in the New Testament.
I wondered if her assuredness might be a little bit like Mary, the mother of Jesus, accepting her role, and Rebekah accepting her role.
I like that. Thank you for that. I like how this is a much more intimate focus on the conversation between Eliezer and Rebekah as opposed to the crowd scene that we had from Poussin. And I don't know about you, John, but I think this Rebekah is very pretty, even if she's not likely to look very Middle Eastern here.
I definitely agree with you on that one.
All right. All right.
Her face and hair remind me of some pictures I've seen of Mary Antoinette.
Yeah, I can see that. Here's quite a different take here from Tissot.
I think Eleazar looks more like a beggar in this rendition.
Mm.
Or he could just be an older man tired out from a long journey.
For real.
I think Rebekah looks a little haughty. Hands on hips. Or is that just confidence?
Either way, maybe a bit of both.
Well, she's looking directly at us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, her outfit looks like she's carrying something in all of those folds, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, a lot of drapery.
Yeah.
So Tissot was an artist, a French artist who actually traveled to the Holy Land and made a lot of sketches and observations of the land and of the traditional dress and customs of the people. He really wanted his biblical illustrations to be as authentic as possible. So where you see in a lot of the earlier artists that they're kind of that everybody looks kind of European and the buildings and the foliage also have a decidedly European cast. Tissot is really going for a very Near Eastern aesthetic in a lot of ways.
I like the guy's face. His beard, his earring.
Yeah. And can I just say, I love that in the story, Rebekah gets a nose ring, because, you know, I have a nose ring and I feel like connection with her through that. So.
It's clear here that she has a distance to the water, so that may part of the rush to get back and forth.
Yeah. Good.
I don't know, some of the confidence to me, I've just been connecting it with the fact that she's got a pot of water on her head and she's trying to balance it.
Yeah.
But I would think you'd need a lot of balance there. So.
And to stand up very straight, I would imagine.
Well, she's in this picture is showing her as very confident. Very confident.
Okay. All right. I want to pause here for a moment. We're at just about half past the hour with just a half an hour left to go. And so I want to check in with all of you and see what you would like to do with the rest of our time. I have another Rebekah story. I have some Rachel and Leah stories. I have Zilpah and Bilhah stories. And then I also have some anthropological, sociological context for the Matriarchs stories. So how would you prioritize the last of our time together? And also, would you like a break?
Yeah, so for the next 4 hours of class.
Let me just say, I am not one of these teachers who thinks that we have to cover all the material. I love that the looking and the observing and noticing and the insights have just gone so deep and broad that we've spent a very luxurious amount of time with the stories and the pictures that we have. I will gladly share the rest of my slides with you so you can carry on from here on your own. But what would you like to do with our remaining time?
Out of my curiosity, I would love to at least touch on as many of your other stories as we can without making it feel rushed or.
Okay. Of the biblical stories?
Yep.
Okay. That sound good to others? Okay. Do we need a break or do we just charge on through?
Let's keep on going to fit as much in as we can.
Okay. All right. Boldly forward then. All right. Can I get a reader for Genesis 26, first 11 verses?
There was a famine in the land as bad as the famine during the time of Abraham. And Isaac went down to Abimelech, king of the Philistines in Gerar. God appeared to him and said, "Don't go down to Egypt. Stay where I tell you. Stay here in this land, and I'll be with you and bless you. I'm giving you and your children all these lands, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I'll make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky and give them all these lands. All the nations of the earth will get a blessing for themselves through your descendants. And why? Because Abraham obeyed my summons and kept my charge, my commands, my guidelines, my teachings. So Isaac stayed put at Gerar. The men of the place questioned him about his wife, and he said, "She's my sister." He was afraid to say, "She's my wife." He was thinking, "These men might kill me to get Rebekah. She's so beautiful." One day after they had been there quite a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out his window and saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she's your wife? Why did you tell us she's my sister?" "Because I thought I might get killed by someone who wanted her," Abimelech said. "But think of what you might have done to us. Given a little more time, one of the men might have slept with your wife, and you would have been responsible for bringing guilt down upon us." Then Abimelech gave orders to his people, "Anyone who so much as lays a hand on this man or his wife dies."
Thank you for reading. Okay, so let me take the temperature of the room again. So do we want to just push through stories? Do we want to have discussion time? Do we want to look at pictures? I'm open to whatever. You're muted, Linda.
I like the pictures.
Okay. All right. I have pictures. So here we have a painting from the hand of Rembrandt. What stands out for you here?
I notice his hand and see it as being not only protective, but possessive.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, as we read, like father, like son, he was not very protective of his wife. And again, having her say that she was his sister.
Mercy. Now there is a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Uncertainty about the subject matter of this painting. You can see that it has two alternate titles. And so we don't know what Rembrandt's intentions were, but it has often been associated with Isaac and Rebekah.
Again, very European in style, dress, even the background.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was Isaac touching Rebekah as his wife.
I think that that's the main reason why some art historians and scholars have suggested that that's the subject matter here. So, yeah. I think it's worth looking at through that lens.
And her left hand is responding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was looking at that, and then the other thing that hit me about the painting is that she isn't looking at him.
Hmm.
I mean, this seems to be a love match, right?
That's... Go ahead.
But he isn't really looking at her either.
Right.
Yeah. So if you were hoping for cats, Janara has come to share her floofy goodness with us. So. I think it's a very beautiful image, just the richness of the fabrics and the colors. But you're right, there's sort of a tension between the tenderness of the gesture and then the facial, the faces not being turned towards one another. Yeah.
I found myself thinking of the scene from Fiddler on the Roof. Tevye and his wife were an arranged marriage, just as Isaac and Rebekah. And the question is, do you love me? After all these years, do you love me? Yeah, and I think that's what I see in Rebekah's face, at least, you know.
Yeah. It's a powerful resonance. Thank you. All right. Another story? Genesis 25, beginning with the 19th verse. If anyone wants to pull that up, that would be delightful.
I can read that.
Thank you.
This is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. That was it, right? 24.
Through 34, actually, but you can go ahead and stop there, and we'll have another voice pick up at 25.
When her time to give birth came, sure enough, there were twins in her womb. The first came out reddish, as if snugly wrapped in a hairy blanket. They named him Esau. His brother followed, his fist clutched tight to Esau's heel. They named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. The boys grew up. Esau became an expert hunter and outdoorsman. Jacob was a quiet man, preferring life indoors among the tents. Isaac loved Esau because he loved his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. One day, Jacob was cooking a stew. Esau came in from the field, starved. Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stew. I'm starved." That's how he came to be called Edom. Jacob said, "Make me a trade, my stew for your rights as the firstborn." Esau said, "I'm starving. What good is a birthright if I'm dead?" Jacob said, "First swear to me," and he did it. On oath, Esau traded away his rights as the firstborn. Jacob gave him bread and the stew of lentils. He ate and drank, got up and left. That's how Esau shrugged off his rights as the firstborn.
Thank you for reading. We have noticings or observations about the story.
See the favorite.
I like that interpretation. The shrugged off. My NRSV has despised.
Tom, I didn't quite catch what you said. There's a little bit of a distortion in some of the sound coming from.
My NRSV has what I think is usual. It says despise his birthright, but I like what she just said. The shrugged off.
Yeah.
That was
Thank
from
you.
the Message.
Thanks, Kathy. That's great. Other noticings about the scripture?
We don't often hear about the women going to the Lord. Usually it's the men. And in this passage, it talks about Rebekah being concerned about the struggle within her womb and going to the Lord and asking him about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't speak up on the last picture or with Isaac and Rebekah, but my thought had been maybe she was saying that there was movement in her womb and he was feeling it. That would mean this picture goes more with our most recent story than the one before. But anyway, I thought, oh, he's feeling the kicking of the babies in her womb.
It does suggest that, doesn't it, Carolyn? That's the placement of the hand and her hand atop his. And then also, I think that might be an explanation for why they're not looking at each other. They're both sort of, internally focused. They're sending their thoughts inward towards the child within her. Yeah, or children, as we know. Yeah, good. Thank you for that. So we come to a depiction of the story of the birthright.
It's interesting to me in this picture that the boys are talking in front of the parents, whereas when I was reading the scripture, I got more of a feeling that it was more of a boy on boy kind of a conversation and environment.
Thank you for that.
There's the dog again.
There's the dog.
I'm just struck by the favoritism of parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know that's just going to mean trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like possessions are a big factor in one's value. And even if you go back to the other ones, and we've had several illustrations of individuals lying to kings about siblings as sisters, and the Israelites were authorized to go in and kill men and take their wives. And so I can see where the three men in their stories were afraid that they'd lose their life for somebody to take their wives. But that stems from a story of taking possessions from the enemy. And so in this case, we've got Jacob clearing the way for his possessions from his brother. So possessions as wealth.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. So this painting utilizes a technique known as chiaroscuro, which just means light dark in Italian. But it's interesting to note sort of what the source of the light is and why the artist chose to depict this scene in such a way. So I will ask those two questions of you. What's with the dramatic light and dark as an artistic choice?
It casts the Esau figure in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of gives full frontal illumination.
Yeah.
There's more light there than could possibly come from one candle.
Indeed.
Is it like just like for dramatization? I don't know.
Primarily, yeah. But then the next question is what is being highlighted? What is being sort of receding into darkness? How might that be part of the way the story is being told? Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that the table is highlighted, and we know the importance of the Lord's table as we come to it, and that breaking of bread and that communion together.
Yes, and then note that the actual food in the two hands is in darkness.
I know Isaac's posture, like it looks like he can't see, he's trying to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered whether he just wasn't paying attention to either son.
I can see that. And this is kind of a two-part episode too in the lives of this family. So in Genesis 27, then the sons are going to come before their father for their blessing. And it's Rebekah as the instigator that sends Jacob to prepare a stew before Esau gets back with his game, and to put skins on his arms so he feels hairy like his brother, and then to sort of steal that blessing out from under his brother after the birthright has been sold.
Is it my imagination, or is that Fido focusing attention on what's going on?
I think so. Say more about what that says to you, Bruce.
I'm still thinking about that. I just observed the presence of Fido there.
The dog is paying more attention than the man.
Ah.
All right. I think we have time to at least get started on Rachel. So Genesis 29, first 14 verses.
Jacob set out again on his way to the people of the east. He noticed a well out in an open field with 3 flocks of sheep bedded down around it. This was the common well from which the flocks were watered. The stone over the mouth of the well was huge. When all the flocks were gathered, the shepherds would roll the stone from the well and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone covering the well. Jacob said, "Hello, friends. Where are you from?" They said, "We're from Haran." Jacob asked, "Do you know Laban, son of Nahor?" "We do." "Are things well with him?" Jacob continued. "Very well," they said. "And here is his daughter Rachel coming with the flock." Jacob said, "There's a lot of daylight still left. It isn't time to round up the sheep yet, is it? So why not water the flocks and go back to grazing?" "We can't," they said, "not until the shepherds get here. It takes all of us to roll the stone from the well. Not until then can we water the flocks." While Jacob was in conversation with them, Rachel came up with her father's sheep. She was the shepherd. The moment Jacob spotted Rachel, daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, saw her arriving with his uncle Laban's sheep, he went and single-handedly rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the sheep of his uncle Laban. I don't know how far. Then he kissed Rachel and broke into tears. He told Rachel that he was related to her father, that he was Rebekah's son. She ran and told her father. When Laban heard the news, Jacob, his sister's son, he ran out to meet him, embraced and kissed him and brought him home. Jacob told Laban the story of everything that had happened. I don't know if that's the end or not.
One more verse, I'll read it. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Thanks for reading. So anything stand out from that story for you?
A lot of inbreeding. Sorry.
And another endogamous marriage, yeah, for sure.
I mean, historically, that's where it was in the European tradition also, between the various households, were often related. And
especially amongst royalty and nobility, yeah.
Yeah.
But also true of the Egyptian pharaohs' households. And
Exactly.
interestingly, that was the practice in indigenous Hawaii as well. So,
And of course, we have to have our well. Don't forget the well.
yes. Possibly even the same well where Eleazar met up with Rebekah.
But interesting, it would take a group of shepherds to remove the cover, and Jacob removes it single-handedly. The things that love will do for us.
well, if the shepherds were all women, it might take a couple of them to move it, whereas a man could remove it himself. So there's that question.
Might make for a nice rom-com movie moment, you know. Jacob the toughie gets the well cover removed all by himself. So here's one image of that meeting. What do you notice? What stands out?
We have goats on one side and sheep on the other.
Isn't that interesting? And with regard to the figures, which hand are the goats on and which hand are the sheep on?
The left and the right.
Mm-hmm. Not an accident, I don't think. I think our dear Mr. Vandergroes had Matthew 25 in his head as well. So, other things that stand out or that you notice here?
Well, I think it's interesting that the goats are being shepherded by what appears to be a female figure, and the sheep are being shepherded by what appears to be a male figure. And then you have the couple in the background on my right side that I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they look like they're in some kind of an embrace.
Okay. So one thing to know about, especially medieval and Renaissance image making, is that sometimes we have more than one scene in the same scene. And so, or a different moment from the same story in the same picture. And so if we think about those two figures that Terry's pointed out in sort of the middle right ground, who might they be and what part of the story are we seeing here?
Well, the well is for everybody, regardless. And you had already mentioned the sheep and the goat, but I think they're supposed to be oxen, but they kind of look like cattle in the back, and a couple of oxen pulling a wagon. And so everybody's being fed here, regardless of where they're from. And every animal's being fed.
Good. Yeah.
Well, those two figures in the right mid ground, do they seem to be both male?
I think so, yeah.
So is that supposed to be somehow Esau? Is one of them supposed to be Esau? And
I would read that as
and
Jacob
Jacob?
again, but with Laban, with his
Laban.
uncle.
Yeah. They've moved from the field to the homestead, and it would look like Jacob being greeted by Laban, and then Rachel is standing there witnessing their greeting.
Yep. That's how I would see it as well. Thanks, Lynn. This may have been a preparatory study for a painting. We don't really know, but I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in it nonetheless. It's a different depiction slightly later from an Italian artist.
Rachel seems to be a little overdressed for sheep herding.
For real. That was my first thought too.
Well, I like the fact that she's not a skinny looking girl. She's a stout girl. And a dog in the picture.
And a dog.
Here's old Fido again.
Actually, it looks like there's a couple of dogs that I'm not sure.
I wouldn't be, yeah, I can see some other animals that I would maybe read as dogs, probably helpful with the sheep herding.
So they're exchanging a kiss and shaking hands. Am I seeing that right?
Well, it
looks like it. Yep.
But I would say they both look like they're dressed more like nobility again.
Definitely. Yeah. Any other noticings that you want to lift up on this image?
This sort of looks like France.
Yeah, the
I mean, a sort of French pastoral scene.
yeah. Italian, probably that's where the artist is from. But yeah, at this time period, the European artists really did not have a lot of knowledge of lands or customs beyond their own hometowns, really. And so you do get these very European looking landscapes and clothing and so on and so, and people. My friend Andy, who did a BA in art history at Oberlin, refers to this whole phenomenon as bringing the Ark to Flanders. So on that note, as we're coming up to the end of our hour, I think I will turn things over to Enton for any closing announcements or things like that that you might need to have from him.
Yeah, golly, Bobbi, our time went way too quick. This was delightful. Thank you for leading us through that. Thanks for everyone who was able to be a part of this today. For those that may have been in and out or having connection problems or who want to see it again, I'll be preparing a recording and posting that. So that will be available and you can direct other people to that and go back. But yeah, Bobbi, thank you for exemplifying one of our really wonderful ventures courses. We're just really, everyone can put their hand, you know, up here. Thank you. And Bobbi has said that if you want to stay for a few more minutes and chat, if you have more questions, because we sort of anticipated that we might have to draw to a close pretty quickly, she'd be willing to do that. But Bobbi, I invite you to have the final word before we officially end this course, to send us out with a thought, a benediction, or prayer, or whatever you feel led to do.
Thanks, Enton. I'm going to actually let some matriarchs have the last word here. And I'm going to give you another pair now of Orthodox icons, because in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Sarah and Rebekah at least are considered saints. And so here we have Sarah the righteous, and you'll notice that her attribute in her left hand is a basket of bread as she makes a sign of blessing. And then we have Rebekah the righteous, and her attribute is a pitcher of water and a towel as she also makes a blessing. And so may you be richly blessed by this deep dive into the matriarchs, by hospitality, by generosity, and by the example of our foremothers in the faith. Amen and amen.
Thank you, Bobbi. This concludes our course. Thank you all for being here. Bobbi, thanks so much for leading us. And tune in next semester for the Ventures courses that we are still finalizing, but are going to be eager to announce before long. Thank you.
There you go.